Imagine a creature so feared, so powerful, that entire civilizations surrendered rather than face it. Now imagine that this apex predator refuses to eat anything, not even the cloned meat of its fallen enemies. Not until a human, a cook, walks in and changes everything. This is the story of fire, flavor, and something far older than war. Backhand index pointing right. If you're loving original sci-fi stories where humanity shines through in the strangest ways, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite alien food idea, and don't forget to subscribe for more weekly cinematic tales. Now let's begin. The creature hadn't moved in 72 hours. In the heart of the orbital station synthesis arc, sealed behind 12 layers of carbon weave plating and psychic nullifiers, the most dangerous living organism known to the galactic concordat lay in what appeared to be deliberate starvation. It had rejected everything: protein cubes, blood mimics, synthesized flesh, nutrient broths, even prey simulations tailored from its own planet's ecosystem. The Vronix tyrant was dying. By choice. A circle of diplomats, scientists, and military strategists stared through reinforced observation glass, some in silent terror, others in quiet awe. "It should have gone feral by now," muttered Director Trelvon, her gills fluttering. "This species once devoured its own offspring in times of scarcity." "It's not weakness," replied General Carson, human, square-jawed, long-tempered, and growing more uneasy by the minute. "It's restraint. Which means it's thinking." On the far side of the chamber, the Vronix sat upright, eyes open but unfocused. 10 feet tall even when slumped, its bioluminescent scales had dulled from deep crimson to a lifeless gray. Its 6 limbs were folded inward like the petals of a dying flower. It did not pace. It did not roar. It simply refused. Dr. Yulon of the Uvaxi cast dared speak. "Perhaps it can't identify any of our offerings as real food. All meat is cloned. All flavors engineered. Its species wiped out the Meldari Empire by eating their psychic elders," another muttered. "We're lucky it hasn't eaten us." "No," Carson said grimly. "It's waiting." The silence deepened as the creature suddenly stirred. Its head tilted, slightly, and its jaw opened not in threat, but as if inhaling. Then it did something none of them expected. It spoke. Not a roar. Not a telepathic burst. Actual words. Broken. "Oh, ancient. I will not eat lies." The phrase echoed across the observatory like a seismic wave. In a sublevel mess deck, Staff Sergeant Elira Miles was halfway through peeling garlic when the station lights flickered. Not unusual. The Ark had been jury-rigged a dozen times over and housed enough species to give a gravity stabilizer a nervous breakdown. Elira worked alone, preferred it that way, in a sealed kitchen barely wide enough for one human's idea of comfort. She hadn't even been in active service until last week. Her station was meant for morale support, comfort food for homesick diplomats, maybe a clever pie for interspecies meetings. Nobody ever expected her to be summoned by name. So when 2 towering synth-armored guards knocked and handed her a sealed datapad, she laughed. Then she saw the authorization codes. Then she stopped laughing. Carson didn't waste time. "We've thrown every biochemical compound we have at it. It won't touch synthetic protein. It ignores raw organics. It sniffed at our finest luxury dishes like they were landfill." He paced the war room while Elira blinked at the holoscreen projecting the Vronix's current vitals. "You want me to cook for it?" "Not for it. Near it. In the same atmospheric chamber. Maybe it'll respond again. It's only ever reacted to smell. When our Andari chef tried, the beast almost convulsed. Maybe it's allergic to saffron." "This isn't a joke, Sergeant." Elira's voice dropped. "With respect, sir. What makes you think I can fix what 12 alien governments and a galactic science team couldn't?" Carson hesitated, then turned the screen to a replay. It showed a 6-second clip from 2 days ago. A small tray of human-made comfort food, beef stew with root vegetables, being loaded into a food disposal chute by mistake. As it passed near the Predator's containment unit, the Vronix lifted its head. Just once. She recognized the steam pattern. It had been her stew. Left over from a staff meal, destined for disposal. "You got the only reaction out of it in 9 weeks, Carson said. "So yeah, you're our last resort." She entered the containment kitchen like a priest walking into a volcano. Every surface had been sterilized. No automation. Just analog tools, a hand flame, and raw ingredients imported from Earth 2 weeks prior. Through the partition the Vronix loomed. Not aggressive. Just still. Like a nightmare waiting to be remembered. Elira tried not to look at it. She unpacked her knife set and lit the induction burner. Her hands were steady, but only because she couldn't afford not to be. She picked lamb. It wasn't logical. It wasn't scientific. It was personal. A roast. Shoulder cut. Marinated with crushed garlic, black pepper, rosemary, a dash of vinegar and a spoonful of apricot jam, her mother's secret. The scent lifted into the sterile air like a thread of memory. From the corner of her eye she saw the Vronix turn. No aggression. No movement. Just interest. She roasted potatoes next, basted them in lamb drippings, added sea salt. Made a reduction glaze from wine and bone stock. Plated it with reverence. The security hatch hissed open. She stepped inside the adjacent chamber, nerves hot enough to boil her blood. The meal sat on a carbon alloy tray. Between her and the predator, a thick, clear barrier. The creature moved. Not rushed. Not violent. Purposeful. Its 6 legs unfurled like living sculpture. Its claws clicked against the floor. It stopped in front of the food. Lowered its head. Alira held her breath. The Vronix leaned in. Inhaled. A long, slow breath. Then, with almost delicate motion, it picked up the tray and ate. Not ripped. Not devoured. Bite by bite. Chewed. Savored. When it finished, it placed the tray down. Turned to face her. And bowed. One arm pressed across its chest like a salute. Then it returned to its sleeping position and curled around itself like an enormous cat. The observation deck exploded in movement. Sirens rang, not in alarm but alert. Vital signs stabilized. Neural activity spiking, in language centers. Heart rate normalizing. Carson's voice came through her comms sergeant report. Alira didn't look away from the glass. Sir, I think it liked it. By the time she reached the debriefing chamber, the narrative had already spread through 5 systems. The predator had eaten. And not just anything. Human food. Her food. She expected questions. Got dozens. From behaviorists, culinary historians, xenopsychologists. Most tried to reduce the moment into categories and charts. None could explain why. Carson kept it simple. Do it again. This time she cooked chili mango stew, something bold, tropical, spicy, like the markets of her childhood. She threw in cumin and cloves, used real citrus rind, made the flatbread by hand. The predator didn't just eat. It groaned. It subsonic. Like a mountain exhaling. Then it looked directly at her and said in clearer galactic basic than before. Truth tastes warm. Alira sat alone that night, staring at her reflection in a dark kitchen window. The galaxy's most terrifying creature had refused every scientific attempt to nourish it. And yet, it had responded to her. Not to nutrients. Not to precision. To intention. To memory. To story. Was flavor a kind of language? Was cooking the oldest kind of diplomacy? Her hands still smelled of citrus and lamb fat. She laughed. Soft but real. Somewhere in the bowels of the station, an apex predator had finally found something it respected. Not weapon. Not war. A meal. Cooked by a human. Alira didn't sleep. Not because of fear, though the image of the Vronix bowing still rewound behind her eyes, but because the kitchen didn't stop. The moment the predator consumed her second dish, every diplomat, general and neurochemist aboard the synthesis arc issued competing culinary requests like weapon orders. Try something fermented, said the Bracken ambassador. Add alkaloids. Bitter compounds, recommended a Zellian tongue mapper. Spice. Push the Scoville range, Carson had said flatly. Let's see how much heat it can take. But Alira ignored all of them. She cooked what she understood. What she felt. That was the only thing that had worked. Every dish was a conversation, not a performance. And she'd learned long ago that you can't lie to someone you're feeding. That morning, she prepared a dish her brother used to make when he came home from deployment. Aged soy glaze over seared mushrooms, ground beef stir-fried with ginger, chili, sesame oil, and a fried egg cracked on top. Comfort layered with quiet grief. The Vronix approached the meal, unhurried. It paused with its claw hovering over the bowl, then looked through the glass at her. You are sad, it said. Alira blinked. It wasn't a question. Yes, she replied, barely audible. The Vronix touched its chest. Food knows. It ate. With every bite, its bioluminescence brightened. Not the original crimson of its war form, but a gold-hued shimmer that pulsed along its spine. It didn't bow afterward this time. It stood straighter, taller. Then it turned to the wall and spoke to no one in particular. Your species, you give truth shape. When she was called to the debriefing again, they grilled her for hours. What did you put in it? Were the ingredients psychotropic? Did you receive any conscious transference? Elira answered the same way each time. I just made dinner. Carson was the only one who didn't try to reduce it into data. He just watched her like a man seeing the first lightning storm on a dry world. You're changing the game, he said. No. It's teaching me the rules. They tried to bring in another human chef. A celebrity culinary artist from Earth with 3 platinum stars and a fleet of robotic assistants. The Vronics didn't even flinch when he presented a glittering plate of gold-flecked synthetic duck with saffron bubbles. It pushed the tray away and turned its back. When Elira returned the next cycle with nothing but baked cornbread and sweet bean stew, it nearly sang. It knows who cooks for it, she told Carson after. It's not reacting to food. It's reacting to presence. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Then he handed her a folder sealed in black. Read this. She sat on a bench beneath the flickering station lights and opened the file. It wasn't scientific. It was a diplomatic dossier. The Vronics, she learned, was not just an apex predator. It was a myth made real. A creature believed extinct, more idea than entity, used in bedtime horror stories by 3 separate civilizations. It hadn't been captured. It had surrendered. Walked into the Alliance's emissary vessel after decimating a frontier moon. Sat down. Said one phrase. I'm starving. Show me the truth. Since then it had remained still. Waiting. Watching. She thought of how it chewed her food. Thoughtfully. As if each flavor held memory. What if it wasn't trying to feed its body? What if it was trying to remember who it had been? The next meal was a risk. Not because of danger, she was past fear now, but because of what she planned to share. She made her grandmother's old potato curry. It wasn't beautiful. It didn't use luxury proteins or gleaming alien fruits. Just boiled tubers, black mustard seeds, turmeric and hand-crushed chilies. She stirred until the oil separated and the aroma swirled around her like a forgotten hymn. As the dish cooked, Elira whispered into the steam. This was the last thing she ever made for me. She was dying. But she still stood at the stove. Said the food would remember her even if my mind didn't. When she placed the tray near the Vronics, it didn't move immediately. Instead, it lowered its head and placed one claw against the glass. A long pause passed before it spoke. This is grief. Elira felt her throat tighten. She nodded. Yes. The Vronics consumed the dish without sound. When it finished, it let out a deep breath that shook the floor beneath them. Then it looked at her with something she didn't expect. Respect. Then, I have killed many species. You are the first to feed me sorrow. She didn't know how to respond. You said you were starving, she whispered. But maybe you weren't hungry for food. The Vronics' glow dimmed again, but not in illness. In calm. I devoured worlds. None filled me. They screamed, but none spoke. They fed me flesh without memory. That is starvation. And what now? She asked. It tilted its massive head. Now I remember. The words triggered chaos in the command tiers. The station's neural translators confirmed it. The Vronics was fully linguistic, fully sentient, and willing to engage. The galaxy had hunted it as a beast. Now it wanted to speak. Earth's ambassador arrived within 24 hours. He was polite but sharp, like a scalpel disguised as a handshake. A political surgeon. This is more than a curiosity, he told Elira. This could flip the balance of power across a dozen systems. I'm just feeding it, she said. No. You're communicating with it. You've formed the first diplomatic channel with a Tier 0 war form. And it's listening. What do you want from me? Keep cooking. But you're doing something no one else can. Keep it alive. Keep it talking. We'll do the rest. That night, she walked into her quarters to find a message left on her data slab. 4 words. You are Flame Weaver. No name. No sender ID. She didn't need one. The next dish wasn't just food. It was a test. She called it the forgetting meal. Plain rice. Lentil soup. A side of pickled onions. Nothing fancy. The kind of meal one makes at the end of a long day, when all you need is quiet. The Vronics ate slowly. When it finished, it asked, why does this feel like silence? Elira sat on the floor behind the glass and pressed her back to the wall. Because not every truth is loud. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Finally, the Vronics said, my kind once believed only conquest proved value. That only strength mattered. We grew mighty but empty. She looked up. What happened? Its bioluminescence pulsed, faint, almost invisible. We ate until there were no voices left to teach us flavor. She closed her eyes, the words hitting deeper than she expected. Maybe it's time you learned to cook. The predator let out a sound, not a laugh but something close. A chest-deep vibration. Amused. Surprised. You would teach me? Yes, she said. But you'll have to peel your own garlic. When she left that night, she passed Carson in the corridor. He didn't ask what happened. Just handed her a sealed envelope. What's this? Your official transfer. To where? To Earth's first culinary diplomatic corps. They're building a new division. One where chefs aren't just cooks. They're ambassadors. She stared at the seal. This isn't over, is it? No, he said. It's only the appetizer. She turned back once, glancing at the observation window far down the hall. The Vronix sat in stillness, golden light flickering across its form like campfire reflections. She wondered how many worlds it had devoured. And how many it might yet save, if only someone fed it the right meal. Elira's kitchen looked nothing like it had 3 weeks ago. Gone were the bare walls and half-functioning burners. In their place stood custom ovens calibrated to microgravity convection, spice drawers labeled in 6 languages, cryochests of rare produce sourced from across the Alliance. A hovering AI assistant trailed behind her with passive scanning protocols, logging scent patterns and heat signatures. But none of it made her faster. None of it made her better. Only memory did that. She kneaded dough by hand, rolled it into thin sheets, sliced it, twisted it. She cooked slowly, not out of ignorance but because certain truths only emerge at low simmer. The Vronix waited on the other side of the glass, pacing now with the quiet restlessness of a scholar denied access to a library. Its scales had shifted again, now pulsing a faint copper red, alive and aware. Today, Elira said, plating the meal, we try texture. She presented pan-fried dumplings, golden and crisp on one side, tender on the other, filled with earthy mushrooms, chives and spiced meat. A small bowl of soy vinegar dipping sauce rested beside them. The Vronix lowered its snout, sniffed once, then ate, delicately as it always did now. Then it sat back. The outside crunches, it said. Yes. The inside does not. That's called contrast. You enjoy both more when they're together. The Vronix nodded, then pressed its claw to its chest. This is understanding. You give truth shape. You give memory form. A chime echoed across the intercom. She was wanted in the diplomatic observation chamber. Again. Elira cleaned her hands and exited the containment wing, the smell of toasted sesame clinging to her sleeves. She was tired of briefings, tired of speculation, tired of the questions they all asked when the answer had already arrived on a ceramic plate. She entered the chamber to find Ambassador Ryvane of the Lotha species in heated conversation with Carson and a woman she hadn't met before. The woman wore earth navy gray with no insignia, her posture unreadable. This isn't science anymore, Ryvane hissed. It's sorcery. Culinary mind control. It's empathy, Elira said calmly. Everyone turned. The woman in gray approached. Staff Sergeant Elira Miles? I was, yes. You're now classified as Special Diplomatic Asset Alpha Zeta 1. Effective immediately. Elira didn't respond. The woman offered a datapad. The Vronix's cooperation has stabilized 13 treaty zones. High Council consensus now considers human culinary diplomacy a strategic asset. You think I'm a weapon? No, she replied. We think you're a language. Elira looked to Carson. What happens next? He exhaled through his nose, eyes heavy. They want to replicate you. Impossible, she said. I'm not doing anything programmable. They don't care, the woman said. They'll try anyway. We're already building culinary envoy divisions. They've recruited chefs from 5 continents. You're their benchmark. And him? Elira asked. The Vronix. Carson looked down at the table. They're voting to designate it as a sentient species. If approved, it becomes an autonomous diplomatic entity. If rejected, back to being a prisoner, she finished. Or worse, a test subject. She pushed the datapad back toward the woman. Tell the council they don't get to commodify truth. Not with protocol. Not with algorithms. You can't manufacture honesty. The woman frowned. You're making this difficult. No. I'm making it real. They let her leave. For now. Back in the kitchen, she sat cross-legged against the wall and watched the Vronix across the barrier. It had drawn patterns into the condensation on its side of the glass. Spirals. Flame shapes. Something like an eye. I am learning your methods, it said. Then tell me something. You're kind. You didn't just eat for survival, did you? The Vronix was silent for a long time. Then. We consumed only what we respected. Flesh was not food. It was legacy. Our rituals demanded we understand the history of what we devoured. Its place in the web. Its intentions. That was how we honored the life taken. And when did that change? When we grew hungry for power. When we ceased asking who the meal once was. We called it efficiency. Evolution. But it was forgetting. Alira thought of the instant noodles she lived on during her early deployments. How flavorless her world had become in those years. She wondered if forgetting always began with convenience. So your species didn't just die out, she said softly. They hollowed themselves. The Vronics didn't argue. I don't want you to go back in chains, she said. I want you to be seen. Then teach me to feed others. She blinked. You mean, cook for someone else? Yes. I thought your kind only took. Then teach us to give. The idea rooted in her mind and refused to leave. 2 days later, the station's conference atrium was cleared. A table was set. Not grand. Not official. Just wood and light. No military. No armor. Just Alira, the Vronics, and 2 guests from species once nearly consumed by it. The Vronics had prepared the dish itself. Under supervision. Its claws weren't designed for delicate handling, but it had been patient. Alira guided it. Chopped. Stirred. Adjusted. What emerged was simple. A thick broth infused with garlic, bone marrow, and stone fruit. Floating inside were hand-formed dumplings made from flour, egg, and fat rendered from native grain animals of the guests' homeworlds. No one spoke as the bowls were served. Not even Alira. The Vronics stood, tall and silent, until the 2 guests tasted. Then it said, each bite contains the echo of your home. Not taken. Not stolen. Shared. The delegates ate. Slowly. Eyes uncertain. Then thoughtful. Later that night, Alira received the report. Both species had withdrawn their objections to the Vronics' recognition as a sentient entity. The motion passed. The predator was no longer a prisoner. It was now an ambassador. She closed the report and sat alone in her kitchen, the station's lights dimmed to evening hue. Her hands smelled of broth and ash and memory. She heard the soft scrape of claws behind the glass. I am not what I was, the Vronics said. You never were. I am still learning. We all are. It watched her for a moment, then spoke in a voice quieter than any it had used before. When the stars burned silent, when all my kind were ash and story, I dreamed of something I had never known. It was not conquest. It was not victory. It was a table. She looked up. A table? Yes. One where no life begged for mercy. One where truth sat beside us. Not beneath. She swallowed the ache in her chest. Sounds like a place worth finding. Perhaps we build it. One meal at a time. Her calm chimed. A message from Earth. A new assignment. Diplomatic envoy. Human Culinary Corps. Mission. Cross-cultural healing via food across disputed sectors. She looked at the words for a long time before replying. Only one word. Accepted. Outside the glass, the predator-turned cook rested, haloed in amber light. ChatGPT said. The diplomatic transport slid into orbit above the neutral station known as Junction 7, a place once infamous for failed treaties and ambushes. Now it shimmered with a different kind of tension, hope spiced with fear. Aboard the vessel, Alira stood at a viewport, watching the stars ripple past polished glass, the Vronics seated silently behind her. It had chosen to accompany her on this mission not as protection or display, but as partner. The other species didn't know what to make of that. Their arrival marked the first human-led culinary diplomacy summit in galactic history, and Alira hadn't cooked a single thing for days. Not out of rebellion but out of purpose. The meal that would be presented today would not be hers alone. It would be shared, prepared in tandem by 2 once incompatible creatures who had decided to find understanding on the same chopping board. The corridor lights flickered gently in blues and greens as they walked to the station's central atrium. Security was tighter than usual, plasma nets, motion sensors, multiple translators humming in overlapping dialects. Waiting at the far end of the room were 12 beings, each from a species that had once considered the Vronics a myth, a weapon, or a curse. Some watched Alira with caution. Others regarded the Vronics with outright dread. She bowed with composure. The Vronics mirrored her, albeit with a chest-wide gesture of both deference and challenge. Welcome, Alira said. We do not ask for truce. Only for a meal. Pause. No one moved. Then the eldest delegate, a Lorathi with bioluminescent throat sacs and centuries of scars, stepped forward. And what truth does this meal carry? Alira met the question with steady eyes. Memory. Not mine. Not yours. Ours. She motioned to the preparation table behind her. The ingredients had already been laid out. Nothing exotic. Just honest. Grains. Oils. Spices that told of homes lost and rebuilt. The Vronix moved with precision. Its claws handled the components not with instinct, but with intention. It worked beside Elira without command or hesitation. As it chopped roots from an Andari farm world, she stirred a base broth made from traditional Zelian seed marrow. A Hadran bean paste was folded in carefully, an ingredient once declared taboo during conflict with Earth but now reclaimed through quiet acceptance. It wasn't just cooking. It was invocation. One by one, the delegates moved closer, drawn not by politics but by scent. Their nervous glances turned into reluctant curiosity. When Elira set down the bowls, 12 in total, she said nothing. She let the food speak. They ate. No speeches. No formal recognition. Only the click of utensils, the brief stillness that falls over a table when something unexpected but genuine is tasted. And then came the shift. The youngest delegate, barely of age, looked up and said, "This is what my mother used to make. But it's not hers. It's different. Because it's everyone's," Elira said. Built from what was, layered with what could be. Silence rippled across the room. And then came the first nod. Then another. A third. Small, incremental confirmations that perhaps something ancient was being rewritten. Then came the twist. The walls trembled. A sudden power fluctuation swept through the room, momentarily darkening the lights and triggering the emergency lockdown shutters. The entire station vibrated, not with attack but with proximity. Carson's voice came through Elira's calm, unidentified vessel just arrived. Large. Not alliance-coded. And it's broadcasting a one-word message, hunger. The delegates recoiled. One reached instinctively for a sidearm. Another raised a barrier field. The Vronix stood taller, its voice slicing through the fear like a blade of calm. "I know this echo." Elira turned toward it. "You know who it is?" "Not a who. A what?" "An echo of what I once was." The delegates froze. "I thought your kind was extinct," the Lorathi hissed. "Most are. But not all remain sleeping. One awoke. And it is unbound by memory. It does not seek understanding. Only consumption." Carson's voice returned. "They're requesting you by name, Elira. And they're asking for flame." She exhaled through her teeth, knuckles whitening. "They've seen what you've done," Carson continued. "And they want to taste it themselves." The Vronix placed a claw gently on her shoulder. "This one does not want a meal. It wants proof. That I have changed. That I am no longer what we were." "Then we feed it," she said. "Or die trying," the Vronix finished. The delegates erupted in argument. "We can't let it dock. Detain them. This is madness." "Silence," Elira said louder than she meant to. "They did." She stepped forward, eyes scanning each face. "You have known fear. So have I. But today I offer something else. Not surrender. Not weakness. But defiance in flavor. In memory. In dignity." She looked to the Vronix. "Let's cook." They were granted access to a quarantine chamber aboard Junction 7. The docking clamps groaned under the mass of the arriving vessel. The air seemed to tremble as if reacting to the arrival of something old and unfinished. Inside the isolation cell, the entity stood, massive, black-scaled, taller than the Vronix by a head. Its eyes glowed like molten glass, its limbs tense with a predator's expectation. It didn't speak. Elira rolled in the prep table. "What is this?" she whispered to her companion. "Vronix Prime," it answered. "The first of us. The last who remembers nothing but conquest." "You think it'll eat?" "It will if it recognizes truth." She had never cooked under such scrutiny. She mixed barley and blood fruit, blistered vegetables and spiced fat, infused it all with layers of clashing aroma, heat and sweetness, acid and umami, each drawn from the histories of the species it had nearly destroyed. It was not a dish of peace. It was a warning. She plated it and stepped back. The entity sniffed once. Then again. It approached. Then with terrifying calm it picked up the dish and ate. When it finished it looked at her. Then at the Vronix. And it spoke, voice like shattering obsidian. "This is not victory." "No," said the Vronix. "It's survival." The Prime turned. It did not attack. It did not bow. It left. That was enough. Later Elira sat in silence. Her apron stained, her hands blistered. The delegates filed one by one through the chamber, none with words, only nods. Carson joined her last. "Whatever you fed that thing," he said, It changed the course of history. I didn't feed it, Elira whispered. I reminded it. Of what? That even monsters remember home. She closed her eyes. And the stars burned a little warmer.